Now, after everything else was already playing, it was time to also introduce the last missing stem, which is this lead vocal chop slash melody type of thing. Here I felt that I kind of wanted to just match the stereo image of what I did with the vocal chops, not in terms of like necessarily moving left to right, but just the same type of stereo width. So this is what I'm doing in the first step with it. After this, I also kind of like felt that maybe a little bit more. So we could make it a little bit, like cut a little bit through more. I don't necessarily use this particular EQ a lot, although I really like it for this for the reason, because if I flip the face, or like I press that button, it not only does it flip the face, but it's also introducing a little bit of a distortion to the signal, which if it sounds like this, it's going to make it sound a little bit more real, so it won't feel as digital. If this particular function also has an EQ attached to it, it's I'm going to use the EQ too, but I could use any other EQ for that part of the job. It was really just about like making sure that the signal cuts through as clearly as possible. And yeah, at this point, when everything is already playing, it's time to set up at least an approximate output chain. This comes down to everyone's personal preference. I much prefer to have the mix balance ready before setting up the output chain. Some people already start out by having an output chain that they know they want to mix into it right away. I prefer not to do that. In most cases, I'm going to use the same plugins though, so and with very sort of like similar settings, but there's no one size fits all, and in certain times I'm gonna like switch up the order in which I'm using the plugins, or like maybe even I'm going to use a different unit in case of my most preferred ones. So I just prefer to like set up the dry mix first, and then move on with the output processing later on. And I'm going to repeat the process in a second session after I'm done with the first, so that I'm going to adjust the mix in the context of now the output chain present, and I'm going to once again like just fine tune all the other remaining details for a second session. And this is usually when I send out the first pass to any client. Now with the G-Bus compressor, my goal is basically to make the needle move roughly 1 dB, and to make it essentially to react to the more musical material. Like in 99% of cases, I'm going to engage the sidechain filtering, which means that the compression won't react to the low end signals. It's only going to compress the really truly musical material, which are above like 80 hertz or so. And obviously with every single song, you're also going to have to like slightly tweak this, because you kind of want to find the spot where the bass and the kick resonance, like the kind of ending, there's no more like bumps, which the compression would still react, which are not, I wouldn't consider like really musical. Yeah, so this is my goal, like roughly 1 dB of compression of the musical material. Now after the G-Bus, I wanted to introduce another compressor, and in most cases my plugin of choice would be the Manley MU. Here I went for the 33609 emulation instead. Basically, I just wanted a little bit more like like a smoother type of compressor, and yeah, this is what felt right to me. Just given my experience with using these plugins, like this is the one that I kind of felt would be right for the job what I wanted to do here. And with the Manley, what I would do is I would unlink the channels, and this is what I'm probably going to do here the same way, because with the first unit of compression, I want to make sure that I affect the musical material as a whole. But with the second one, in most cases, I also wouldn't use any input sidechain, so that I would feed the whole signal to the compressor. But in the case of this particular unit, if I see the needle moving and this is turned off, and then that's already going to be too much. But I knew that I wanted to have a little bit more of like an effect coming, like actual compression effect coming from the plugin. It's not just I was just looking for some sort of like dome shaping, or I don't know, but I actually wanted the compression type of effect to be a little bit more prominent, even though this is a really smooth sounding unit. So even when it's working like relatively hard, it's still not gonna be all that much noticeable, especially with these automatic release settings. These are like really dialed in. These are amazing. But at the same time, I still want to go for a unit with this unlinking option. and just to create the same 3D effect that I would create with any other unit, whether I would use the Manly EMU or maybe the API 2500. Those are great units too. It's just that this is so the Manly for me would sit inside in the middle. That's my usual plugin of choice, and then 15% of the time I'm gonna go for the API, and another 15% I'm gonna go for the 33609, depending on whether I want to go even more smoother direction from the EMU, or whether I want to go a little bit more like smacking is the word that comes to mind. So basically the API is best in my experience in use cases where I want to be able to like grab the signal a little bit more noticeably, and this is the exact opposite. This is like again, it like even when it works like relatively hard, the effect is not as noticeable, but it's still working and it's still very reliable and just sounds amazing. Now, after the compression I felt was okay, it was time for a little bit of general output EQ. And my plugin of choice for this job in most cases is going to be the Massive Passive. There are all sorts of like mastering type of equalizers. Like really the only thing you should be looking for with these units is to not boost too much. And the reason I really like this plugin is because it's very user friendly in this way. Like even when I like bump up the knob like this much, this is only going to be like still not really more than 3 dB or so. And so even though it seems like I'm doing a lot, it's not that much, but it's going to but every single move on the output channel is going to feel like like a compounding effect in a sense, because you're affecting everything. And so here you want to be a little bit more forgiving, especially with the EQ moves, and especially when you're focusing on more narrower ranges. Like of course when it's wider ranges, you can get away with more things, but yeah, so this is basically just a really nice sounding plugin in general. It has a little bit of a vibe to it. So it's definitely not a neutral EQ, but it's something that I would very often use, especially if I wanted to bring out the high end, because this is what I feel that this particular unit is the best at. And I very rarely use the shelf mode. So whenever I turn on any of these knobs, I'm in almost all cases going to set it to bell setting and work what needs to be worked that way. Tonal balance control. So this is really annoying, but you see on the screen right now, like ever since I updated to macOS, I don't know which version it was that completely bricked these Isotope plugins, but the interface sometimes just that does not load up properly, and I have to like quit, reload, and it's just annoying, but whatever, I can kind of like live with this. So about tonal balance control, just in a few words, it kind of shows you whether the balance of what you like set it. Like you can select different settings here. Like you can select this bass heavy setting, which is by default. Like in most like dance type of music wants to be bass heavy. But you can also like select like more poppy ranges and etc. It just shows you whether you're in the right ballpark or not. And with certain songs, like you also should not really take this as a like the like your Bible or anything, because this is just like with certain songs you might want the low end to overshoot. So in certain cases you want it to undershoot, and like same goes for the low mids, because if a song was produced, like for example tech house songs, with this is like extremely common, that the low mids are purposefully like empty in terms of the production itself. So it's like I don't like there's no point in trying to EQ against the production, even if you're like doing the mix. Like if there's nothing significant playing in the low mid range, then you don't want to bring it up. And in those cases, this plugin will also like overshoot the high end if for example if the low mids are low. Like usually that's where the compensation is gonna come from. But here I felt that it was in the case of this particular song, it was worth to check with tonal balance control whether I'm on the right track or not. And just looking at this, maybe a little bit of a shaping in terms of a little bit less direct low end and a little bit more in this range would be beneficial for the song in terms of like a little bit more, it would give a little bit more clarity, and a little bit everything would be slightly more understandable. So this is probably what I will go for. And but other than this, I think the tonal balance measurements are like more or less already there where I want them to be. And yeah, after like this EQ procedure, it's time for our last line of defense before the output limiter would be introduced, which is going to be again an instance of Golfos. This is the mastering version of the plugin, in which you can like dial in much smaller and more precise settings in terms of your recovery and your taming. In most cases, I'm not even going to use recovery on the output, because I prefer to not affect the output that much. And I'm probably going to like dial back even from these settings, probably even from the taming and even from the recovery, because my go-to settings, I would say, are going to be like around 5% taming and 0 recovery. And with certain songs, I might want to leave the recovery in a little bit, where I feel that so this obviously depends on what I'm hearing. But if I hear that it brought up something which I feel is like sitting right with the song, so it's still within the artist's vision, then I will keep it. But when it will like very noticeably go against the artistic vision, and yeah, in those cases, I just wouldn't use the plugin at all. If there's something literally problematic, I would just use a dynamic EQ or maybe some alternative to that, or I just would just, depending on what the artist wants, obviously, or the label, I would just leave it as it is. But yeah, here I felt that this was one of those cases where not only using the plugin was right, but the recovery setting was also bringing out a little bit more of the details of the song that I felt were sounding amazing. And after all this, it was time for a little bit of like imaging. And yeah, usually what I would do with this particular plugin is to like enhance the high end a little bit, check for like whether there's any confusion in this middle range, like between 100 and 300. Like these are my usual settings, how I set up this plugin. So there's a crossover around 100, then there's around 300, and then there's one around 2K. And I try to set them up in most cases to be to be like gradual around each other. So it's very, sometimes it's going to happen, but it's going to be very rare when I'm using one band at like plus 50 and another one at minus 20 or something. Like the mix has to be like really really weirdly balanced for me to go for settings like that. So as long as I have like at least a decent enough mix, then I'm not going to use big values in general. And I'm just basically looking to showcase more details about the mix whenever I'm bringing out, or whether I'm even removing certain stereo information using this particular plugin. And yeah, it's time for the last plugin in the chain, and it's the good old Ozone Temp Maximizer. And yeah, we're just gonna check and reference our loudness levels, whether we are hitting our target or not. And I'm trying to hit our target in a way where we're not going to introduce distortion to the mix. And as long as this is the case, I'm happy. As far as these loudness unit levels go, I don't really have like a set target for every single song, because certain songs can be pushed to be like obscenely loud, and certain songs just like whatever you do around -7 LUFS, you're gonna get like almost drop out like distortion, which just doesn't let you push it any further. And sometimes I get requests to push it even further than that, and in those cases I'm gonna have to like start to look for compromises in the mix, which is for like other videos where I'm doing that. I'm gonna explain how I'm doing those. But yeah, so just as a general thought, which I wanted to touch on for a second, is that these loudness measurement units, while they are kind of sort of important, my only one like particular thought whenever I'm making the songs louder using the limiter is to make sure that I'm like I want to affect this material. So whenever I visually see that I'm doing, let's say, like around 2 to 3 dB limiting, I'm already gonna stop and see whether what I'm doing is right, or like whether I can push it more, because certain material are gonna be more forgiving than other types of material. So this like really depends on the song at hand, how much low end they have, how wide the soundscape is in general. And yeah, so certain songs are more forgiving when it comes to loudness, and others are not as much. So I don't really have a target. I'm really just listening to the material, and as long as it sounds still kind of like dynamic and natural, but I also don't want to leave too much dynamics in, because that's not really how the trends go currently. So I definitely want to to make it noticeable that there's an end limiting, which is doing something to the song, but I also don't want to overdo it further to the point of like any sort of like audible distortion or something like that. This is basically just my thought process whenever I'm setting up the end limiter, and I'm not really targeting any loudness. Like there's no particular loudness number that I would target at like basically any point in time. It's very rare that someone like, you know, comes to me with a request for a number. I mean, I can most likely do it, but it's very hard to, with a song that I mix, I'm much more okay to do it with. But when I'm mastering a song, or when the goal is to keep the artistic vision present, in certain cases I have to make compromises for those types of loudnesses to be able to be achieved without like you know, distortion or any other like certain type of like audible artifacts. So with a project like this, I'm a little bit more against that type of approach, to try to hit a target loudness rather than just make the song, you know, be as loud as it possibly can be, while still preserving all the artistic vision and all the elements that makes the song, you know, great as it stands right now, instead of like looking for compromises to make it louder. And yeah, as I'm looking through the footage right now, there's a little bit more declicking procedures. There's like I did a very almost unnoticeable line of compression and dynamic EQ layer, just that to make sure that the vocal is a little bit smoother, and this dynamic EQ acts as a de-esser essentially, and I'm also removing a few clicks here and there. But other than this, you know, this is what my contributions were to the project, and hope you enjoyed this breakdown. Once again, I don't know whether I'm going to publish this video as a whole, or maybe I'm going to cut it up into parts, or whether I'm just going to use clips from it, but I hope it was enjoyable, and yeah, thanks for watching. See you in the next one.